There's no one way to write a book from beginning to end. That's probably why there's so many books for writers on the topic. Most have a narrow focus on one part of the process, like getting through your first draft, editing, or building good writing habits. But some books are a little bit more ambitious and take on the process from start to finish and everything in between. That's what Gabrielle Pereira set out to do with DIY MFA, which is a great title, by the way. This is the book. Getting back into school to improve as a writer and to further your writing career isn't feasible for everybody. So many aspiring writers have to go at it solo, DIY it. And for me, I wanted to approach it with some structure, build my own curriculum for craft, business, and inspiration. And she's put together a version of what I've been building for myself. It's pretty comprehensive. It even talks about finding the right writing community. Gabrielle Pereira earned her MFA at the New School in New York, and is a writer, a teacher, and a host of a podcast, DIY MFA Radio, that has masterclasses and interviews with best-selling authors. Her goals for the book are for you to learn how to set customized goals for your writing, generate new ideas, how to outline your book, read with intent to borrow from techniques from writers that you might study, and how to network like a professional. These are all things you're going to need if your goal is to share your work and have long-term success. Craft-related chapters focus on fiction writing, going into detail about designing your story structure, building chemistry between characters, and making exciting scenes, which are all valuable, but for the writer who's just getting started from scratch or near scratch, who this video is for, there's a lot of advice here that'll alleviate some of the fears people have of making the initial commitment to their writing goals. First, she suggests evaluating where you currently are in your writing journey before beginning to articulate your short-term and long-term writing goals. She asks questions for you to answer for yourself so you can have a clear, honest picture of where your habits can afford some improvement and adjustment. Like, how long have you been writing regularly? How much do you write each week? A follow-up to that question might be, how much time is available for you to get your writing done? Is your schedule structured or sporadic? Are you focusing on one project or experimenting with numerous ideas? Some people can write numerous projects at the same time or in the same period, while others need to focus on one thing at a time. Writing for more than one thing can be done, and it's probably easiest done if you block your time for each, so you're not randomly writing one thing, then another, and then going days or even weeks with one of them falling off your radar eventually. But writing is the output. So in regards to input, she asks, how many books do you read per year? Do you read regularly? What are your 3 favorite topics or genres to read? What are the last 5 books that you've read? Reading is very beneficial to your writing for nearly endless reasons. And in a later chapter talks about building your expertise as a writer and delving deeper into that. But generally, if you're trying to develop a style or fine-tune your voice, you need to be reading regularly. Stephen King is quoted as saying, writers read and readers write. And if you watch interviews of famous and successful writers, they all point to things they used to read that either inspired them, challenged them, or left them so unimpressed to the point that they felt like they could do better than whomever they were reading. It seems rare that non-readers become successful writers, so if you're not reading regularly, but you have stories to tell, you better, get reading. Dive into your genre or into the topics that you want to write about, or both. Just do both. She also asks that you evaluate your relationship to writing communities. So do you have critique groups where you can exchange feedback? Have you gone to any events or conferences? Do you read any blogs on writing, or magazines or websites on writing? Outside of getting feedback for your work, writing communities share resources, contacts, and tips too that can make the journey a lot less stressful and a bit more direct than if you go it alone. So even with the overwhelming amount of content out here on nearly anything that you want to know more about, after assessing where you are, you can focus on building a vision for your writing journey. So where do you want to be in your writing career in the next year, 2 years, 4 years, 3 months? How many books do you want to write within a given period? Or how many copies do you want in readers' hands when you finally publish it? Be specific and write it down. In the book, she says that her vision changes from year to year. So even if yours happens to change next year, which it can and likely will, you still want to be clear about your direction moving forward and sort of calibrate periodically. To pursue your vision, you want to have the right kind of habits in place, though. And she came up with an acronym for habits to get you there. H is for honor your reality. A is for add constraints. B is for block time and batch tasks. I is for iterate. T is the 10% rule. And S is for setting the mood. Now, some of these are self-explanatory, but there's a couple that deserve some close consideration for getting the words down consistently, which is the most important part if you're just starting. One is adding constraints, which is simply setting a time limit that's reasonable for your schedule and deciding on a word count goal for your sessions. You're not going to write your entire book in one sitting anyway, so why not, set a pace for it? Some might ask, why not set a goal for a number of pages? But just consider that if you're typing, that different fonts can change the length of a document, and if you're writing by hand, you'd have to account for how large your writing is and the specifications of the paper you're using, like this college rule that allows for more words to fit on one page, or wide rule. So, all of that makes a difference. So it's just better to measure your progress by number of words. But in terms of the amount of time, you got to determine what works for your schedule. But an hour is a good minimum to work with, because it's hard to get into a flow with anything less than that. If you have more time that you can commit, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2 straight hours, go for it. But another is time blocking and batching tasks. Time is one of our constraints, but next is deciding where that designated time is going to fit into your life. We all have lives with various responsibilities and likely busy schedules, so it's important to schedule your time to write, set in stone, just as you would at a meeting for work or a class or any other appointment that you would want to keep. Our early mornings, the only time that will work, but you're not an early riser. You might have to train yourself to get up that 1 extra hour or 2 extra hours early to get it done. Or are the evenings the best for you, but it requires you stay later than usual? Sacrifice is sometimes part of the equation. Some people use physical planners, but using your phone or another device is really helpful because it can alert you for the upcoming session. Your planner isn't going to just walk up to you when it's time to write. Use what's at your disposal. Practical advice that she gives is really helpful too, because as a creative person, the last things that you want to spend any mental energy on are deciding in the moment how much time you're going to spend writing each time you sit down, or how to know if you've had a successful session because you haven't set a benchmark for your word count. You just want to be able to sit down and not have to worry about anything other than getting the words down. I use a timer when I sit down to write so that I don't go over the time that I've set, and it helps alleviate some of the pressure of having to track the time or constantly check it. Like I said earlier, the meat of the book is advice for fiction writers, but you already know that you have to get the writing done, and we'll go into detail about that at some point in the future, but we want to focus more on what she says about studying and reading to become a stronger writer. There's a section in the latter half of the book titled Read with Purpose, with 3 chapters on the importance of reading and how to make proper use of books to become the kind of writer you're setting out to be. First, she lays out what she calls the essentials, which includes an anthology of short-term literature, a book of prompts, and in books on the craft, reference books on the craft of writing. A lot of short-term lit can be read in one sitting and includes poems, essays, short stories, or fiction or memoir. And you get to see the story from beginning to end. So if you want to go back and see how everything works together, how the author crafted the turns, built up a climax, or achieved the level of depth that escaped you on the first read, then you can without having to go back through hundreds of pages again. It should be obvious why reading through a book of prompts would be beneficial. Writing about the same thing, the same way each day can get stale, and the book of prompts can energize your writing with unique ideas or perspectives to bring to whatever it is that you're writing. A book that she recommends is 3 a.m. Epiphany by Brian Kitely. I actually picked this up a while ago and sort of picked through it. I'll share on it when I go through it in its entirety. But lastly, our books on the craft of writing, so fundamental things on fundamental techniques like grammar, word choice, but there's also books on advanced things like temporal ordering, which concerns story structure. The most recommended book on grammar is Strunk and White's Elements of Style. So this is one of the popular books on grammar. Definitely rereading this can heighten the effectiveness of your writing, getting in touch with the technicalities. But in addition to the essentials, he also has approaches for gaining expertise in your domain, So if there are stories you want to tell based on real life, whether in memoir or story or gaining expertise, can be helpful. It can be easy to dismiss doing a little digging because you may already feel like you know everything that needs to be told in your story. But she suggests that you perform a thematic analysis, which is reading books by various authors who specialize in the topic and form arguments based on what you learn. Now, what you pick up will sort of seep into your writing when you come back to it, whether you intend it to be there or not, which is actually what you want. That's sort of one of the consequences of gaining expertise, is that it shows up in unintended ways and moments. Another way to build expertise that she mentions is in the author study. This might actually be my favorite, honestly. I was doing this before I came across her book, so it's validating to see this is one of the ways that she mentions gaining expertise. But I felt like my DIY MFA was moving in the right direction. Like I said, her book focuses mainly on fiction, but it's easily applicable to writers in nonfiction genres too. So if you're a poet, find the poet whose work inspires you and read collections of their work. For a time, I read Amiri Baraka's poetry pretty much daily, as well as the work of Bell Hooks. But the benefits that Gabrielle points out is that by looking at an author's entire body of work, you gain not just a deeper understanding of the genre or the topics that they cover, but insight into their process too. She calls it a virtual apprenticeship or studying mentor texts, which I think is a great way of looking at it. But because you're not just reading for enjoyment, though you might enjoy it, but you're learning under someone through their body of work. Last way that she mentions, which is probably the most obvious way of building expertise, is a historical survey. This is where you focus on the history of your particular genre. It allows you to see how your niche developed over time. You could pick a particular span of time, like the last couple of decades. The example that she gives is if you're using a journal form, check out the best-selling books written in journal form during that time. In poetry, it could be bestsellers or winners of notable prizes that acknowledge mastery in the form like the Pulitzer. All this reading that she suggests could seem overwhelming, especially coupled with your responsibility to write on a regular basis. But you don't have to use all these reading suggestions at the same time. Work with the essentials and proceed with what makes the most sense for you and your life as it currently flows. You can afford to get a good hour or two of reading in on a given day a couple times per week. That's better than nothing. But pursuing your goals is supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to be fun too, especially if you have a passion for writing and find purpose in getting your stories out. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, hit like and subscribe for more on writing, editing, publishing, creativity, and updates on our projects as we continue to build the foundation of our independent publishing endeavors. Peace.